Numbers chapter 11. Numbers chapter 11. All right, does anybody have anything to do during the day? When you wake up in the morning, you say, I got to do such and such, such and such, such and such, such and such, such and such. Anybody out here have any of that? We all have that, right? Yeah. And you moms especially who work, y'all really got work outside the home. Y'all got double duty because y'all got to keep everything going at the house too. And so there's a lot to do. We all have things to do when we wake up in the morning. Now, for those of you who are retired, I don't know exactly what you have to do, but anyhow, y'all can enjoy, and nothing wrong with that. Just taking it easy and enjoying life. There's always, work to do. There's meals to make. There's jobs to do, maybe around the house or wherever. There's errands to run. There's homework to do, right, kids? Homework to do. Preparations to complete, activities to attend. There's always dusting that could be done, right? It's amazing where dust comes from. Have you ever dusted something on one day and then you look the next day and you say, I thought I just dusted that yesterday? Dusting needs to be done. Bills to pay, activities to attend, people to see, storms to weather, a future to plan, and just on and on and on and on and on. There are things to do. Now, most of the time, we just handle those things without much thought, right? Man, we just kind of go through it. Just kind of go through it and get that. It's just a part of living. But I ask you this question. Have you ever had a day that was just a little bit overwhelming? You ever had a moment that was just a little bit overwhelming? You say, I don't know how I'm going to get all of this stuff done. I don't know how I'm going to get all this homework done. I don't know how I'm going to get all these jobs done, and the boss has just, piled the stuff on me, and then I got all this stuff at home, and the oven's broke. Or you can do like Linda Clay. I talked with her today, and she said that she turned on, put something in the oven, and then started smelling something. She had turned it on bake, but the broiler came on, and so it was catching it on fire. And she said a few $100s later, it's still not working right. So, those kind of things happen. The washing machine goes out. You got one of the pipes start leaking or just whatever. Somebody gets sick or somebody, can't make it home on time. Whatever. Sometimes things just become a little bit overwhelming. Well, and then sometimes, other people put expectations on us, and that kind of gets us too. Gets a little bit overwhelming. Now, in Numbers chapter 11, and you say, what in the world does that have to do with Moses taking his problems to the Lord? Well, I think you figured that out, right? That sometimes we have these things become overwhelming. Where do we go? We go to the Lord. Now, and we're gonna show you how that happens here. Now, the people of Israel left Egypt, and then how long did they wander in the wilderness? 40 years. 40 years. Now that's a pretty good long time. 40 years. Do we have anybody that's right on 40 out here? Okay, Joe, Ben, when are you getting? So you're right on 40 then. Okay, so Joe's getting ready to be 40. Ben's right on 40, then Natasha, it won't be too long, right? That's right. Oh, yeah, there you go. So anyhow, yeah. Just look at Ben and look at Joe, and that's what 40 years will do to you. All right? That's what 40 years will do to you. And can y'all imagine the length of the time y'all have lived? Y'all would be wandering in the wilderness. Yes, ma'am.
And if you double it, that's what
That's going to say, yeah. That's what 80 will do to you. Yeah, there you go. I hope I'm just as intelligent and fast and witty and strong as Brother Bill when I'm 80 years old, I can tell you. Anyhow, all right, so 40 years they wandered. Now, the book of Leviticus, all right, we're not in Leviticus, we're in Numbers, but the book of Leviticus covers 1 month of their 40 years. It's basically a time, it's just a time where God's given all the laws anyhow. The book of Numbers, of course, records the other 39 years or so of wandering in the wilderness. So we have the book of Numbers here, and so in these chapters we have 39 years recorded here. In chapter 11, where we're getting ready to read, we're still in the first year, basically, of the 40 years. Now, I want you to think about that for a second when we get ready to read that. Even after 1 year, the people are already tired and weary. They're already mad and upset. And they've already started what we know to be what they did in the wilderness, right? Groaning, moaning, griping, complaining. Verse number 1. And when the people complained, it displeased the Lord. Do y'all think when we complain it displeases the Lord? When the people complained, it displeased the Lord, and the Lord heard it. Isn't that interesting? Last week we talked about meekness, you remember, and we had the story of Miriam and Aaron raising up against Moses, and they spoke against Moses, and in that passage of Scripture it said, and the Lord heard it. Do y'all think the Lord hears us when we talk? Do you think the Lord hears us when we complain? Oh, yeah. When the people complained, it displeased the Lord, and the Lord heard it, and His anger was kindled. We complain about it getting hot, and guess what? I think the Lord throws another degree or two in there. His anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burnt among them and consumed them that were in the uttermost parts of the camp. How about that? And the people cried unto Moses. And when Moses prayed unto the Lord, the fire was quenched. And he called the name of the place Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burnt among them. And the mixed multitude that was among them fell a-lusting. And the children of Israel also wept again and said, Who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes. And they said it even worse than that. Has your kids ever said, Are we there yet? Does that aggravate you? 10 minutes out of town. Are we there yet? No, we got a long way to go. Have you ever just complained? You know, it sounds like these people are just complaining constantly about things that they need to be thankful for, but they're complaining about things. Now, have you ever had your kids in the car together? And especially if you got a smaller car, they're all in the back seat together, and they say, "Well, she just touched me." Or she's on my side, or he's on my side. When Shannon and Becky were younger, we went on a trip to Ohio. We had a LeBaron, a Chrysler LeBaron, which is a little four-door sedan. And we went, and me and Dana sat in the front, and Becky and Shannon sat in the back. And we brought a lot of their toys and a lot of things with them. But they could not, for whatever reason, they had half of the back seat. They could not get along. So when we got back, we went and bought a minivan that had seats for me and Dana in the front and then 2 seats in the back. And we put one of them girls in one seat and one of them in the other seat. And we still had trouble, of course. But at least they wasn't on the same seat. But you have that, you have that imaginary line in the back seat. And y'all know, and then, well, they're on my side. That's what it sounds like right here in Numbers chapter 11. What you want to do, of course, is scream as a parent. You just want to scream. And we've showed you the video, where the guy takes them and he stops the car and puts the duct tape on them. And that's not a bad idea sometimes. Just don't do it at the bowling alley, because we had a friend of ours do that at the bowling alley, and that was dumb because the police showed up. But he was going to keep his kid quiet. But there you go. Anyhow, so they're complaining. Now, and I'm trying to set the scene here for you, because they keep complaining and they keep coming to Moses and they keep doing this and they keep complaining. They keep coming to Moses, and we don't have this, or we want this. We when you start complaining, you have selective memory, do you not? Because they all of a sudden started thinking about all the fish that they had in Egypt, which I guarantee you they didn't have a whole lot of that, and all the other things they had in Egypt, which wasn't all that much. But while they were in Egypt, they were a bunch of slaves. Then they had the audacity to say, those were the good days. Those were the good old days. They started complaining. And by the way, complaining really does not help anything. Did you know that? And it really doesn't make you feel better, even though you may think it does. And I'll tell you what complaining really is. And this is not a message about complaining, but I'll tell you, it's really, what complaining really is? It's a lack of appreciation for what God has provided. Somebody who is a complainer really shows that they are an unthankful person. An unthankful person. Focused on problems rather than solutions. And you know what complaining also does? It drags people down that's around you. Do you know that? It drags people down that are around you. And so, we now go to verse number 10. Then Moses heard the people weep throughout their families, every man in the door of his tent. And the anger of the Lord was kindled greatly. Moses also was displeased. See, God was taking care of them. He was meeting their needs, and yet they were groaning and moaning and griping and complaining. And notice what Moses did. Moses said unto the Lord, you got to listen to this. You got to read it. Wherefore hast thou afflicted thy servant? In other words, why have you done this to me? And wherefore have I not found favor in thy sight, that thou layest the burden of all this people upon me? Have I conceived all these people? Have I begotten them? That thou shouldest say unto me, carry them in thy bosom, as a nursing father beareth the sucking child into the land where thou swearest unto their fathers. Do you think he's a little aggravated here? Whence should I have flesh to give unto all this people? For they weep unto me, saying, give us flesh that we may eat. I am not able to bear all this people alone, because it's too heavy for me. And if thou deal thus with me, kill me, I pray thee, out of hand, if I have found favor in thy sight, and let me not see my wretchedness. How long did they wander in the wilderness? 40 years. What year was this? Woo, man. Moses says, I have had enough. I'm worn out already. I'm discouraged. I'm tired of messing with these people. I'd rather die than continue with these folks. And basically what he says, you have to read through if you know Hebrew, I know Hebrew, so you read through the Hebrew, and basically what he said is, I didn't ask for this crummy job anyhow. Y'all ever felt that way? Y'all ever felt unappreciated? Overworked? Taken advantage of? Unsuccessful? Have you ever felt like you couldn't please anybody? Have you just said, I'm giving it all I can, but the people just want more? Or this one wants more, my boss or my wife or my husband or whatever. I can't never please them. By the way, if you are a complainer, then I want you to remember tonight that you do affect other people, and especially those in leadership. You can absolutely just snatch the courage and the wherewithal away from anybody that's in leadership if you're just going to complain. I mean, it drags people down. It drags people down. And we see it right here. Moses is already tired. Now, but you have to remember, and Moses understood it because it says this, that he heard, in verse 10, he heard all the people weep. And then in verse 11 it says, and Moses said unto the Lord. You know what we start doing, don't you? We start talking to ourselves. It doesn't say, and Moses said unto Moses. It said, Moses said unto the Lord. So he realized that he was not alone, and even when we feel most alone, the Lord stands by our side. And I'm going to tell you, when people are complaining against you or causing you grief like they caused him here, listen, you just might as well remember that God knows exactly what you're talking about, because that's exactly what happens to God. Exactly. And God understands, and let me tell you something, I think God really appreciates what you are doing, because He does not measure things the way the world measures them. And so we have to talk to the Lord. And we have to, don't get down, don't get discouraged. We got to keep on going on. We got to keep on trusting the Lord. And keeping on. So he talked to the Lord. Now, when we talk to the Lord, however, I believe that God will do things. And here we see that God came along, he took his problems to God, and then God gave him some advice, and he followed God's advice. And I love this. Now, you know one thing, and we'll not take the time to read it, but God said, okay, Moses, I'm going to take care of the menu here. We're going to have more than manna tonight or tomorrow. We're going to have some quail. And the Bible even talks about it in this chapter. You can go home and read it if you want to, but it talks about how the sky got dark. It wasn't a rain cloud. You know what it was? It was all the quail that God was sending them. And of course, God sent them so much, where it started running out their nose and their ears and everything else. And, symbolically, because but he said, I'm going to give them that. I'm going to give them that. Now, also, Moses is a little skeptical because he's trying to figure out, how where's all the meat going to come from? Well, God can take care of that without any problem. It's kind of like when Jesus fed the 5,000, you remember? With the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. And those disciples, you know what they were doing, don't you? What we do a lot of times. How is he going to do that? Let's see, there's 5,000 plus women and children. So if everybody's going to get a bite, it's going to have to be 1 millimeter of a piece of fish and 2 millimeters of a piece of bread. That's not going to fill them up. What they didn't realize is that God was there getting ready to take care of the situation. Now, so God says, okay, he has a problem. The people are crying out for flesh. And he takes it to the Lord. And the Lord said, I'm going to take care of this for you. But then what I want you to see here tonight is God's compassion on Moses himself. Look at verse 16. Look at verse 16. And the Lord said unto Moses, gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them into the tabernacle of the congregation, that they may stand there with thee. And I will come down and talk with thee there, and I will take of the Spirit which is upon thee, and will put it upon them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with thee, that thou bear it not thyself alone. So you know what God says? I'm not going to give you just an assistant. I'm going to give you 70 people who are going to help you out when dealing with these people. Now, folks, that is some good news. Some good news. And so when Moses had all these problems, and matter of fact, Moses was to the point, again, you read it, he wanted to die. He wanted God just to kill him. And he just said, man, I would be better off dead. God said, no. We got 39 more years here. So I'll deal with it. I'll deal with it. All right, you know what happens when you need help? You go to the Lord. You go to the Lord. And then you focus on God's character rather than your problem. And what a great example this is here of God. Moses having all these difficulties, all these problems. He takes them to the Lord, and the Lord takes care of the problem. Maybe not in the way Moses would have even thought of, but God takes care of the problem. So I encourage you to be like Moses. When we have issues, trouble in our life, take it to the Lord. Follow God's advice when God gives it to you, because Moses, of course, did this in this chapter. All right, now the last thing is this, up here on the board. Number 5, he was a man of proper priorities. Turn over to the book of Hebrews. I want you to write all that in. And the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. I just actually preached on this not too long ago. And so I just want to remind you in the last 10 minutes or so that we have here that he was a man of proper priorities. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 24. We'll start with verse 23. By faith Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents because they saw he was a proper child, and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. By faith Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. And so we see here Moses, a man of proper priorities. Now, where did Moses grow up? He grew up in the palace of Egypt. The palace of Egypt, the most richest, the most probably sinful, most powerful place on the face of the earth. That's where Moses grew up. But when he came time to make a choice whether he was going to go that way with his life, when he came to years, he made the choice to follow God instead of following the world. Now, Moses was 40 when he made that decision, but guess what? The time comes a lot quicker now. Joe and Ben, y'all are 40, or right around 40. It wasn't just this year that y'all made your choice. Now, some people wait till they're 40, but that's not it. You have to do that so much earlier. And everybody's going to make choices. And all the choices that we make is going to head us down one direction or another. People make right choices. People make wrong choices. You see a lot of people hurting today, and I'll tell you why they're hurting. Because they've made bad choice after bad choice after bad choice. You see people who are doing well, and as far as life is going well for them, and I'm talking about with the Lord, well, you know what? They've made good choice after good choice after good choice. And so life is all about choices, choosing. And so Moses made this choice for God, and of course that decision that he said, I'm just going to follow the Lord, I'm going to go with the people of God. What a difference that made in his life. The lure of the world, the attractiveness of sin, of all of the riches of the kingdom, the pleasures of sin as it talks about here. Listen, they were very attractive. But he made his choice for God. He had the proper priorities in his life. Boy, how we need that. You want to walk with God? You're going to have the proper priorities. Notice in chapter 11 and verse 26, the word esteem or esteeming. It means to account, to weigh the pros and cons, a calm, reflective decision. Moses looked at everything that Egypt had to offer him. And then he looked at God and his people and what they had to offer him. And he chose God. Now, why did he say that I don't want the riches of Egypt? Why did he say that? I'll tell you one reason why he said it. Because he knew they were temporary. They were temporary, not going to last. But boy, the things of God are eternal, are they not? The things of the world are just temporary, but the things of God are eternal. Notice the word in verse 25, choosing. People would look at Moses and say, well, which way are you going to choose? And he said, I've chosen the people of God. And you know what them Egyptians said to him, don't you? What is wrong with you? You must be crazy. And a lot of people thought he was crazy for what he was giving up. But the pleasures of sin, he said, I'd rather choose to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. He said no on earth, but you know what that means in heaven, don't you? That means yes. That means yes. Then in verse 24, it says he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He said, I could, but I'm not. I won't. It's possible for me to do, but I am not going to do this. I am not going to sell out to the things of this world. You know, people go through life, listen to me. People are presented with the things of the world. They're presented with the things of God. And how many people have I seen, here's the things of God out here. They have turned their back on the things of God and walked toward the things of the world. Moses did just the opposite. The things of the world, he turned his back on them and headed toward the things of God. He had his priorities in order. And then the word respect unto the recompense of the reward. He had respect, or he was in essence looking forward to the reward that he was going to get one day. And he was looking ahead to that. Now, have you parents ever said to your kids, you can say no. You don't always have to say yes. No. We ought to be good at saying no. We ought to be good at saying no to the things of the world. Yes to the things of God. Is there anybody else in the Bible that turned away the things of the world and went to the things of God? Well, we just studied it here lately. Joseph, Potiphar's wife, could have had her. He said, no, that's a sin against God. Not going to do it. How about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Nebuchadnezzar made that big old tall statue. He said, when the music starts, you bow down. The music started, they didn't bow down. What did that mean for them? The fiery furnace. The fiery furnace. Daniel chapter 6. Some of those people in Persia got together and said, well, we're going to come up with a law and get the king to sign it. And that you can't pray. You can only pray to the king. What happened when the king signed it? Did Daniel quit praying? Nope, kept praying. What was going to be the penalty for praying? The lion's den. And then they threw Daniel in there, and what did God do? Shut their mouths. He was petting the first lion tamer. And then, of course, the king ended up throwing the other guys in there, and what did God do? He said, well, y'all can have them. Peter and John were told not to preach anymore in the name of Jesus. And you know what they told the people? They said, we got to obey God rather than men. Got beat for it. Moses was ill-treated, suffered disgrace, but he gained an eternal reward, and the peace of God filled his heart. I'll tell you this much. Paul told Timothy, he said, all that will live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. So just mark it down. It's going to happen. It is going to happen. But Moses had his priorities right. It says that he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. By faith he forsook Egypt, verse 27, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. It was like this. It was like God was. He just saw God so much through faith that it was like God was standing right there in front of him, telling him what to do. And he said, "I'm going to go God's way. I'm going to go God's way." You want to walk with God, you got to have your priorities in order. You can't be 50-50. You got to be all in.